Right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel and another workout walkthrough video. Today I'm going to be taking you through my new and current back workout and how I've managed to take my back from this to this over the span of my off season. We're going to go through everything from exercise selection, the reasons behind these exercises, the sets, the reps, the setup, execution techniques, the form, how I do every single exercise, what I'm thinking about when I go into the lift, what I'm really trying to do to maximize the use of my back and really try and develop those weak points and areas that you would have seen in the starting photo from my show day morning check-in photos. And although my tan isn't as good now, the back is certainly a lot better already. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, so for exercise 1, we have the lat pull down. I'm doing this single arm because what single arm exercises allow us to do is align our body with the machine in a way that allows for the best movement pathway. So you can see that I'm kind of turned to one side to align myself with the way that the machine comes down, meaning that I can keep my elbow tighter to my body and really keep the tension on my lat and drive down into my hip with pure purpose. Whereas if I was stood straight, I would slightly diverge and my elbow would come away from my hip, as opposed to a position where I can really align my lat with the movement pathway of the machine. Also, for single arm exercises, what this allows us to do is focus on each side and keep that equal. Of course, we all have certain imbalances, whether that be strength, size, feeling. For me personally, I'm just as strong on both sides. My physique is pretty symmetrical from left to right in terms of my back, but what I feel is that I connect a lot better with one side than the other. My upper back connects a lot better with my right side, and my lats I connect a lot better with on my left side. So what this allows me to do is really focus on creating that mind to muscle connection with each side equally and not have one side overpower the other. The setup here is a 4x12 pyramid. You'd have heard a million times on the channel before. The pyramid style of training that I use, we start with our lightest weight and end with our heaviest weight, increasing weight as we move through the sets. All of them are technically working sets. However, we aim to reach failure and fail in or just below the rep range 12 here on that fourth and final set. So I mentioned aligning the body and keeping the elbow to the hip. I like to use a chicken wing analogy when it comes to training the back. What I mean by this is, as our elbows are closer to the hip, we are using more lat, and as we spread our wings, we move the tension up the back, and then with the most exaggerated elbow flare, we get some rear delt and upper trap recruitment. So this is just a good rule of thumb to work by when training your back. If you're not sure what the exercise does, just figure out where your wings spread when you perform the exercise. If you're coming down here, you're going to be getting more lats. If you're coming up here, you're working higher up the back, the rear delts and the traps. One thing that is especially important when it comes to lat training is using momentum and not swinging and rotating through our hips too much. When we pull down, we're pulling down to the hip. But if we turn too much, we're going to move ourselves away from the lat. And if we're really swinging around like this, you're using God knows what, and you're really not going to be able to focus, keeping the tension where you want it to be, the lats in this case. Another very important cue to remind yourself of when you do train your back is to keep your hands as hooks. Don't pull through your grip strength. Really think about driving the weight through our elbow as we pull down towards our hip. Putting the elbow in the pocket of the hip, elbow into your pocket, driving the weight through that elbow and not pulling through our wrist. This will minimize the use of our forearms and biceps and really keep that tension constant and majority on the back and the lats in this case. A way to obviously increase our ability to do so is to use wrist wraps, where we can literally leave our hand numb and really only drive through our elbow. Okay, so we jump into exercise 2, which is the meat and potatoes of the back workout, the T-bar row, old school grip and rip, because it's not all about the minute and niche details. It's about putting some load and lifting some weight through our muscles in order to make them grow. Mechanical tension is one, if not the most important drivers of growth. How much tension can we drive through the working muscles to best stimulate them and encourage them to adapt and grow bigger to manage that load? That being said, we do want to maintain and really prioritize form in these heavier movements, because where there's more load to be lifted, there's more injury to occur if you do not do it properly. So what I like to do, we mention always a neutral spine spine when doing any hinged or bent over exercise. This is because we don't want our lumbar spine, so the lower portion of our back, rounding and causing any injury here. So what we want to do, you want to think about driving the weight of our hinge into our hips. So as we come down and bend down towards the bar, you want to push your hips backwards like you're doing a Romanian deadlift, and just sit the weight into your hips and keep that stable and brace. So you're bracing your core to keep tight and safe here, and make sure you're not rounding your lower back, keeping your spine neutral. And then we're bracing in our hips to keep that steady and stable position in the hinge, ready to lift the weight. So once you're in that position ready to go, we're again using a narrower grip and keeping our elbows tucked to prioritize more lats. However, when you're in a hinged and bent over movement, you're not going to be able to isolate the lats from the rest of your back. So like I said, this is the meat and potatoes, the general driver of the movement. We're working our entire back. We're not just trying to grow lats here. Lats are a big portion of the back. We want to grow our entire back. And being someone who lacks a lot of mid-back detail, this has been especially important for me to understand when taking my training up to the next level and progressing this body part. So we're driving back with our elbows tucked to encourage lats to be recruited and worked here, but we're also making sure to retract our scapula as we pull. What I mean by retracting your scapula is you want to think that something is between your shoulder blades and you're really trying to squeeze your shoulder blades against that thing and trying to make it pop. So we're driving back with our elbows, getting a lat recruitment, and then exaggerating our concentric by squeezing our shoulder blades together. This creates a full range of motion and a full stimulation of the back. And then on the way down, we're not just letting the weight drop, we're making sure to drop the weight through our elbows. The same way we pulled it up, we're letting it down. Why? Because keeping this same line of movement, keeping the same emphasis on maintaining the constant tension is going to better stimulate the muscle. A better stimulated muscle is a muscle that has the best opportunity to grow. The setup here is a 4x10, and you can see on that final set where the weight is definitely pulling me more than I'm pulling it. I'm keeping an emphasis on pausing in the stretch. Why? Because we're not using momentum to just bounce up the weight like this and reverberate like we're in one of those old school low riders. We're keeping stable, like I said, brace core, neutral spine, hips locked, and just driving, letting the weight down, pausing so that we don't fall over the bar, and then driving back up again. What you want to think about when you're driving up is not to try and stand upright. We're maintaining our hinge throughout the range of the set, throughout the entirety of the movement, because as you stand up, you're going to be using more traps to shrug the weight up, and as we hinge, we're still pulling with our back. And of course, inevitably, when you're lifting those heavier weights, there will be a little bit more body English, so you may come a little bit more upright. Just remember, if you do come a bit more upright, as you get back into your eccentric, reset your hinge and get lower back down again, and this is going to allow you to keep using your back when you pull in your T-bar row. Okay, so moving to exercise 3, which is my favorite exercise, the prime seated row. What having a chest support allows you to do is create counter force with the machine and yourself. What I mean by this is you pull yourself into the machine, and by pulling yourself into the machine, it allows you to really retract your scapula and complete a full contraction, because where there is force, there is equal counter force. Where tension goes one way, it is matched in the other. That is just how the world works, and just one of the laws of physics. So if we're creating more force against the chest pad, it stands to reason we can generate more force coming backwards, move more load with more control, and really put more mechanical tension and stress upon our back, giving it the best opportunity to grow through forcing those adaptations to occur. That is the sciencey stuff, but just to put it simply, having that chest support allows you to pull more weight and grow a bigger back. So like I said, we're pulling ourselves into the machine, which also allows us to pull back without rocking back, and making sure that we can just keep the tension constant as we row. And then when we need to use a little bit to finish those final reps, we can just do a little bit extra to make sure that we're completing the contraction. I have the seat a little bit lower on this, not so much that I'm driving solely with my upper back, but I'm using those upper to mid back fibers when I train this movement. It is such an amazing upper back movement because of the way it arcs. It also makes it a very good lat movement, but we'll cover that in the following exercise. So what it does, it has a nice drop off point where we can really round our upper back, so thoracic extension, to get that extra stretch and increase our range of motion while keeping tension on the muscle. We're not letting our shoulders take the movement like this and relaxing with our back. We're still keeping tight, rounding our upper back, and then driving and increasing our active range of motion. More range of motion, especially in that eccentric, is going to give us more opportunity to grow. The eccentric is not only half of the movement, but it's also what has been found to grow the most muscle. Working in those length and ranges has been shown to be an effective driver of growth. So if you're just dropping back into each set, you're not only cheating yourself out of half of the movement and half of the gains, but you're also cheating yourself out of the more important half of the rep. So So like I mentioned with the chicken wing analogy, we're not really tucked in with our elbows here. A little bit of flare to allow for more scapular retraction and more upper back to be used in the movement. Again, a 4x10 here. And what I do on the prime equipment is in my pyramid, so I said I got a 4x10 here, I actually do my top set on set 3. So I mentioned on that final set you go to failure, so I do that a set early, and then what I do is, because the prime equipment has resistance profile loading, I move more weight into the length and range, so the beginning of the movement in that 4th and final set, to do the same weight again but have it harder and heavier in that length and range. I mentioned before it's where you grow more muscle, but it also happens to be where the muscle is stronger. So what happens is I fatigue and I fail with my top set weight, but I have more energy in the tank in this beginning movement. I'm just more fatigued in the short and the end range of the movement. By making it lighter here and heavier here, I can get more reps out of the set and really empty the tank on that particular movement. So I had 105 kilos on the machine here. I failed with 40 in the mid range. I took 30 kilos and put it into length and range where I still had energy and strength, and went again. And that is just a way that I have found, an intensity technique that I have found to be very beneficial to my progress. Of course, if your gyms do not have this, then just a regular pyramid is still going to suffice and be very effective to your growth, especially if you're keeping control and utilizing those length and ranges. And yeah, surprise, shock horror, my favorite machine we're using twice in this workout. This is actually my first time doing this. It's a new variation. I've just been working around with different single arm movements to see which one I like the best, and this is by far my favorite. So we've got the prime seated row again, single arm with a higher seat this time to allow us to drive lower down into the hip. Of course, lower down into the hip, lower lat recruitment, elbows tucked for more lats. And like I said, this machine has an arc, so it curves like this and drops down. So it really encourages us to drive down as we pull, which is very important when training your lats, because we don't only want to think about rowing the weight backwards, but also about pulling the weight down, as this is one of the main properties of the lat, one of the main functions of how the lat works. So we're driving back and down, getting as much tension into that lat and really squeezing down to our hip. Just because we're not retracting our scapula does not mean we cheat the range of motion by drawing to the hip. We drive to the hip, squeeze down in there, make sure you're really flexing that lower lat to get that mind to muscle connection, and then you're letting the eccentric go, keeping that tension constant before you go again. This is really important to your development in any muscle group, and that is to control the changes of direction. So that is the beginning to the concentric, and then our fully short to the eccentric. So we're not getting to here and then using the momentum to throw the weight back, and then when we get into that hip, we're not just bouncing straight out again. Spend a second here, let the eccentric go, spend a second here and drive. Because what this is going to allow you to do, once you created that mind to muscle connection that I spoke about, you keep that connection because you're keeping the tension constant throughout the movement. Whereas if you're throwing the weight like this, you're going to lose tension, try and find it again, and by the time you found it again here, you're dropping back out again. And by keeping constant tension, you're going to stimulate the muscle more, and more stimulus gives us the best opportunity to grow the muscle. So again here, 4x10 on each arm. Same principle with the way that I conduct the pyramid, where I do my top set on set 3 and then set 4 with more load in the length and range. Really making sure to pause in that length and range now, because we're getting a lot of pull here. And like with the pull down, we're not trying to twist too much through our hips as we pull. We're using our lat to drive the weight back down and really trying to wrap our lat around our spine without twisting our hips. Like I said, if you're twisting like this, you're not using your lats, but if you drive down and pull around like this, you're going to get a lot more lat, get more bang for your buck, a lot more out of the movement. A big tip to think about when doing single arm exercises is your imbalances. I mentioned at the start, you may have one side that is stronger than the other. How to overcome this, I have found, start with a side that is weaker. My right arm is stronger than my left arm. I'm right-handed. I do a lot more with my right arm. I'm more neurologically connected to my right side than my left. So it stands to reason that if I want my left to catch up, I do as much as I can with my left and match it with my right. If I could get 10 with my right and 8 with my left, I'll just keep getting 10 and progressing on my right, and my left would never catch up. Whereas if I get 8 on my left and 8 on my right and progress up to 10, then I'm 10 and 10 and I'm evenly matched, and the imbalances start to not only level out in terms of strength, but also in your physique and your symmetry as well, which of course we all want to be symmetrical from left to right as well as up to down. We don't want to be Johnny Bravo, and we also don't want to look like we've only trained our left side and not our right, and vice versa. So I start with my left, I do my set, I take a little break, wrap up and go again on my right hand side. Okay, old school barbell rows. This is exercise 5, and the reason I have it so far along into the workout is because I want my back to be fully warm and pumped by the time I get to this, because me personally, I struggled with connecting with my back when performing a barbell row. And when I had it in my earlier exercise, I found I was just moving the weight with very little purpose and very little feeling. Of course, my erectors were getting stimulated from the hinge alone, but I couldn't really connect with the movement as well as I liked, and just didn't feel like it was working for me. What I did is I moved it to the end with a actually psychological purpose of I don't have to lift as much weight when I'm doing it as exercise 5 as opposed to exercise 2, because I'm further along in the workout, so I won't be able to lift as much. And then I accidentally stumbled upon my back's already primed and firing from the previous exercises, and the blood's in the muscle, so I can actually connect a lot better when I do it. And also I found that I wasn't that much weaker in exercise 5 than exercise 2. So that is in a nutshell why exercise selection is important. I want to grow bigger lats, so I do lat exercises at the beginning of the workout: the pull down, the T-bar row with elbows tucked, the prime row with the single arm pulling down into our hip. If you start with the bigger and more dominant muscle group, for me, my upper back, that is going to take over the entirety of your workout. It's even when you move into the lat exercises, your pumped and more dominant upper back will take the majority of the load in the movements. Whereas if you start and get a pump and a feeling, a connection and contractions in those lats, even when you move into the upper back movements, you'll get a bit more lat contribution, and that being a smaller muscle group is only going to help you grow it, connect with it and catch it up to your more dominant body parts. So my lats are going to give me a better V taper instead of just having an upper back and no mid to lower. So again, 4 by 10, that is how I structure my barbell rows. Similarly to the T-bar row, we want to sit back into our hips and create a nice strong solid hinge, lock into that movement, neutral spine and brace core, and really think about retracting our scapula as we pull the weight. Not too much flare in the elbows, not really focusing on keeping it too close to the hip. It is just a general all-round back exercise and not focus on any particular portion of the back here, just getting some more weight moved through the back through protraction and retraction. A very important thing to note here is because it is a free moving exercise, it's very easy for the bar to move anywhere, whereas with a T-bar row it's connected to the machine and you can only row in the movement pathway that the bar moves in. A free weight exercise can move anywhere, so it's important to really thinking about driving back into your hip as you row the weight and letting it down through your elbows and not just dropping the weight down, and also using that full range of motion and not letting your shoulders roll forward and take tension off the back. So drive back, keep in the range of motion of our back and not just rolling it forward like this. Drive down and back and then let it go down with tension on the back. I'm not extremely hinged to like a 90 degree. I like a little bit more just because I feel like it allows me to actually move an adequate amount of weight to stimulate my back without standing upright and shrugging the bar, of course. So in that hinge, pull up, a little bit of my hinge elevates and then I'm back into my hinge when I get down into the eccentric. And this leads us on to the most fun exercise. If I could only do one exercise, it would be the hat squat actually for me personally, but apart from that, other traditional lifts, it would be a deadlift. I am using bumper plates as blocks here for a block pull to keep the bar at more of a mid-shin height. The reason for this is, I did mention hat squat's my favorite exercise. I'm a very quad dominant bodybuilder, not only in terms of my physique, my quads are probably my best body part, but also in terms of my strength. So when I pull from the floor, a deadlift is predominantly quad driven at the bottom of the movement, and having that being my strongest body part, I'm not getting too much back stimulation from it because I'm driving my quads and finishing my quads just because they dominate the movement. What having the bar a bit higher up allows me to do is not have to bend my knees as much to activate my quads. I can start in a more fixed position and just pull with my back, really stimulate my erectors and work my back through the deadlifts. Of course, you can put a lot of load on a deadlift, so you can really get a good amount of mechanical tension that I spoke about previously, especially when you're not driving the movement with your legs and quads predominantly. So that is the reason for this. Of course, it is a very dangerous movement if you do not do it properly. So I want to reiterate, getting into the movement, keeping the spine neutral in that hinge position for your start point, not letting your hips shoot up before your back and making your lower back round, bracing your core, use a belt to put intra-abdominal pressure against to make sure you're safe, because that little bit of extra erector growth you're going to get by doing it beltless is not worth the lower back injuries and hernias from losing the brace without that external pressure, in my opinion. But each to their own. What you also want to do is not let your shoulders roll forward, so you're creating tension against the bar before you pull. So you pull the slack out of the bar, you'll hear the bar click against the bumpers, like click as you pull. Create maybe 40% tension with the bar. This allows you to pin your shoulder blades back and flex your lats. This will help to keep your upper back in the perfect position to pull. Then your spine will stay neutral because your hips are in a good position and locked. And then you brace your core to keep that part of have your body fixed, your whole body's fixed, and then you just move through driving the weight up and back. You also want to think about pulling backwards. You're going to have a lot of weight on the bar, so you're not going to fall back, but just thinking about pulling up is going to pull you forward and remove all the positives you just did in your setup. So as you pull up, you think about pulling back, and this is going to be the perfect setup for your deadlift. My pyramid here is decreasing in reps as I go, because I'm very far into the workout now and I still want to get to that heavier top set. So I'll do a set of 10, a set of 8, a set of 6, and then a top set where I go for 6 to 8. And when you're deep into the off season, in the middle of summer, you definitely want to invest in a little bit of chalk for this lift, because the last thing you want to do is fail because your hands are sweaty and you slip. And also a good whiff of smelling salts as well to get you hyped, ready for that final exercise, to grip and rip with control and purpose in your execution, of course. Okay, so that about wraps up the workout. I hope you did enjoy it. I hope you found all the tips useful, beneficial. Let me know in the comments down below what you have tried, what has worked, if you have any extra tips, because I am not the be all and know all. There may have been some things that I don't do or that I just forgot to mention in the video. So if you do have any other tips, tricks, execution, setup techniques that you have found beneficial to you, because the way that I look into a movement, although we may be doing the same thing, we may think about it in a different way to help us connect. Put that down below. You may help someone out. Leave a like on the video if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the notification bell so you don't miss when we upload, because we do walkthroughs like this, especially in the off season when everything's picking up and training is at the forefront. I want to bring you along the journey and show you how I'm changing my training, how I approach all of my exercises, sets, reps and sessions to get the most growth, because that's what we're here to do. You don't want to go to the gym, work your ass off and make no progress. You're going there with a purpose to progress and improve. But as well, we do other things, weekly vlogs of the off season, bit more personality, show you my personal journey as well as these informative type videos. And I did just release a full day of eating, which is linked in the description below. So all of that is to come. Share this video to a friend to build that barn door back, because who doesn't want a big back and a nice X-frame? Until the next one, I'll see you in a bit.